Bullies poured hot coffee. On an old biker. Seconds later, the whole gang arrived. This shocking USA story proves respect matters. Watch till end, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for powerful stories. So let's begin. The sun had barely climbed over the Arizona desert when Jack Miller pushed open the door of a small roadside diner outside Flagstaff. At 68, his movements were slow but steady. His grey beard, faded tattoos, and worn leather jacket told stories most people never bothered to ask about. Jack chose the same corner booth he always did. The waitress nodded at him, already pouring his regular black coffee. He placed his helmet beside him and rested his hands on the table. The scars on his knuckles were old, earned decades ago from war, roads, and Brotherhood, not bar fights or foolish pride. The diner was quiet until the door burst open again. 5 college-age boys walked in, loud and careless, their laughter echoing off the walls. Baseball caps turned backward, expensive sneakers, phones out, filming everything. They glanced around, scanning for entertainment, and their eyes quickly locked onto Jack. One of them nudged another and whispered something, then laughed. Soon they were staring openly. One mocked Jack's jacket, calling it a costume. Another joked about his age, saying he should be in a nursing home. Jack heard every word but didn't react. He stirred his coffee slowly, eyes calm. The bullies slid into the booth behind him. Their voices grew louder on purpose. They talked about old bikers thinking they're tough and fake war heroes. One kicked Jack's boot under the table. The waitress noticed but hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Jack finally turned slightly and looked at them. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. "Just drink your coffee," he said quietly. The words only fueled them. One of the boys stood up, grabbed Jack's cup, and smirked. The liquid inside was still steaming. Before anyone could stop him, the bully tilted the cup and poured the hot coffee onto Jack's arm. The smell of burned skin filled the air. Gasps echoed through the diner. The waitress screamed. A man near the counter stood halfway up, unsure what to do. Jack clenched his jaw but didn't cry out. His arm trembled slightly, skin already blistering. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up. The diner went silent. Even the bullies seemed confused by his lack of reaction. Jack picked up his jacket with his unburned hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. The screen was cracked, the buttons worn. He opened it, pressed one button, and closed it again. No words, no drama. Just one signal sent into the air like a quiet warning. The bullies burst into laughter, mocking him again. One said, "Who'd you call, Grandpa, your nurse?" Another lifted his phone to record Jack's burned arm. Jack didn't look back. He walked toward the door, each step steady despite the pain crawling up his nerves. Outside, the desert wind brushed against his face. Jack leaned against his motorcycle, breathing slowly. His mind drifted, not to anger, but to memories of long highways, fallen brothers, and promises made decades ago. He checked his arm briefly, then looked down the empty road. Inside the diner, the bullies returned to their seats, bragging and replaying the video. They believed the moment was over. They believed Jack was weak. None of them noticed the faint vibration in the windows or the low hum growing louder in the distance. Jack lifted his head as the sound reached him. Engines, not one, many. He allowed himself a small, knowing smile. The message had been received. The road never forgets its own, and neither does a brotherhood built on loyalty, respect, and blood-earned honor. The distant rumble grew louder with every passing second. What started as a faint vibration soon became an unmistakable roar. Cars slowed on the highway. Dust lifted from the roadside. Jack remained still beside his motorcycle, eyes fixed on the curve of the road where the sound was coming from. Inside the diner, the windows began to shake. One of the bullies paused his laughter, tilting his head in confusion. Another looked toward the door. irritation replacing confidence. The waitress felt her hands tremble as she set down a plate, sensing something was about to change. The first motorcycle appeared, then another, and another. Within moments, the parking lot filled with bikes of every shape and size. Chrome reflected the desert sun. Engines idled like restrained thunder. People inside the diner stood frozen, fear thick in the air. Men and women in leather jackets dismounted in perfect silence. Their patches read Iron Brotherhood MC. No shouting, no chaos, just presence. Their leader, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, walked straight toward Jack and gently examined his burned arm. His jaw tightened. He turned toward the diner and nodded once. That was all it took. The doors opened slowly as several bikers stepped inside. Conversations died instantly. The bullies' faces drained of color as they realized the joke was no longer funny. One biker calmly pulled out a phone and recorded the scene. Another asked the waitress if she was okay. The leader stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "Which one of you poured the coffee?" No one answered. The silence was heavier than shouting. One bully tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just a prank. The leader stared at him without blinking. "Assault isn't a prank," he said. The boy's hands shook as his phone slipped from his grip and hit the floor. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had already called them. The bikers didn't move or threaten anyone. They simply stood there, blocking exits, witnesses to everything. The bullies suddenly looked small, trapped by their own choices. Officers entered cautiously, hands near their holsters. The leader raised both hands calmly and pointed toward Jack's arm. The burn spoke louder than words. Security footage was pulled. Videos from the bullies' own phones were handed over without protest. The bullies were handcuffed and escorted out, eyes glued to the ground. Charges were read: assault, harassment, and disorderly conduct. The college they attended would later suspend them. Their online fame vanished, replaced by criminal records. The diner owner approached Jack, voice shaking with apology. He offered free meals for life. Jack declined politely. Instead, he asked for something simple, a sign near the door. The owner nodded immediately, already understanding what it would say. After the police left, the bikers helped clean the diner. One paid for everyone's meals. Another quietly slipped money to the waitress for the trouble. Before leaving, the leader hugged Jack gently, careful of his arm. "You're never alone," he said. As the motorcycles rolled out, the diner felt different, calmer, safer. A new sign now hung by the entrance. "Respect is mandatory. Age, uniform, or leather earns it." Jack sat back down at his booth, a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. He took a slow sip, wincing slightly, then smiled. Outside, the sound of engines faded into the horizon. Justice hadn't been loud or violent. It had simply arrived right on time, carried by loyalty, brotherhood, and the long memory of the road.